Good afternoon and welcome to the February crop production and WASDE briefing. My name is Lance Honig and I serve as chair of the Agricultural Statistics Board at NASS. This briefing is for the Secretary of Agriculture and other policymakers at USDA to better understand the content and context of today's reports. We're very pleased to have Dr. Seth Meyer, USDA's chief economist, joining us as Secretary Designate today. We also welcome Dr. Cindy Nickerson, USDA's Deputy Chief Economist. Welcome to both of you. I'd also like to share with you that we do have some visitors from the Fertilizer Institute right here on the front row joining us today. So welcome to you all as well. Before I turn things over to our presenters, I do have a few notes for our live streaming audience. The crop production and WASDE reports are considered principal federal economic indicator reports. The Office of Management and Budget provides specific guidance on how these important reports are to be released. OMB statistical policy instructs policymaking officials to refrain from making public comment regarding the content of these reports within 30 minutes of their release. Therefore, we will not be taking questions from the public during this briefing. Both NASS and World Board staff are available for phone and email questions, and NASS will host a social media event, 1 o'clock Eastern time today. We strive to have everything presented at this briefing match the official record. However, should there be any discrepancy, always refer to the official published estimates. With that, I'll turn things over to Patrick Boyle, Chief of the NASS Crops Branch. He will be immediately followed by Dr. Seth Meyer, or used to be, right? By Dr. Mark Jekanowski, Chair of the World Ag Outlook Board. So Patrick.
All right, good morning or good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to those joining us on the live stream as well. We've only got a couple of commodities included in today's NASS report, so we'll move along rather quickly here. Before we dig into the numbers, as we normally do, I wanted to share some information on the data sources that were used to put together today's reports. In green, there you can see as part of our objective measurement program, our trained enumerators took counts and measurements from more than 1,200 citrus groves in Florida in mid-January. We also looked at weekly utilization data from the Florida Citrus Administrative Committee. That includes information on boxes packed or processed. Now on to the data itself, and I'll note that we only made adjustments this month to Florida, so the other states were carried forward from last month. All orange production is down 0.9% from the previous month and 11.1% compared to last season. Non-Valencia oranges are down 1.2% compared to January and 3.9% from last season. Valencia varieties unchanged from January, but down 26% compared to last year. Grapefruit production is forecast at down 14.2% from last season. Lemons unchanged from the last forecast and up 7.9% compared to last season. Finally, tangerine production at just over 1 million pounds is up slightly from last month, but down 9% from last season. In addition to citrus, we did take we'll take a quick look at sugarcane. Harvested acreage is down 0.9% from the previous forecast and 1.1% from last year. Yield of 37.5 tons per acre is down 0.3% from last month, but up 3.3% compared to 2023. That results in total production of just under 34.5 million tons, down 1% from last month, but up 2.1% from last year. So like I said, we only had a couple of commodities for the month of February, but before I do wrap up, here is a look at some of our upcoming reports. As you can see, we've got a number of reports between now and the end of the month, including our farms and land and farms publication, cattle on feed, crop values, ag prices, and we'll also post data from the 2022 Census of Ag for the Northern Mariana Islands on the 27th. Looking ahead at March, we have our monthly care reports on the 3rd, and then we'll be back here again on the 11th for another crop production and cotton ginnings update. And just a quick reminder, the Ag Outlook Forum is coming up at the end of the month, just across the river in Arlington. You can gather more information on and register on the USDA website. As Lance mentioned a moment ago, we will have a stat chat session on X following today's briefings, and we'll take questions and share additional information on today's reports. As always, the full reports are available on our website, and that concludes my portion of the briefing, so I'll hand it over to Dr. Jekanowski.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. And, I have a few more slides than but I'm gonna go relatively fast. As you know, February is traditionally a month where we don't have big changes to a lot of the balance sheets. We're gonna take a little bit of a focus on the Southern Hemisphere crops, Brazil and Argentina, and also a quick look at the egg balance sheet. So let's start out with wheat, global wheat production. As you can see, small changes here, increased Argentina's production, 200,000 tons. That's based on this data from the Ag Ministry. Kazakhstan raised, that is final data from their own National Bureau of Statistics, and that would be their second largest crop on record. Global wheat balance sheet. Few things worth noting here. Feed use up, mainly reflecting higher feed use in the EU and Ukraine, where we cut exports. I'll talk about that in a minute. Also higher feed use in Thailand and Kazakhstan are reflecting the larger crop there. Trade, global wheat exports reduced 3 million tons. That breaks down, reduced EU by 1 million tons. Russia reduced by 500,000 tons down to 45.5 million. Ukraine also reduced by 500,000 tons. They're now at 15.5 million, and we reduced Turkey's exports by 500,000 as well. Also worth noting, and that's exports. On the import side, we reduced China's imports by 2.5 million metric tons down to 8 million. And that would be the lowest wheat exports by China in 5 years. U.S. Wheat balance sheet, just updating based on the recent flour milling products report. Raised food use 4 million bushels, and that comes right out of ending stocks. No other changes worth noting there. No changes in season average price either. About 75% of the crop is marketed to date. Rice, global rice production, also virtually no changes. That small increase in Sri Lanka is based on government data. Global rice balance sheet, a couple things worth noting there. Total use raised 300,000. That's China. Higher imports to China, and trade raised. That's all India. Higher exports out of India. They are now forecast at 22 million metric tons of rice exports. That's close to a record for them. Ending stocks tightening up just a bit. That's tighter stocks in India and Sri Lanka. U.S. rice balance sheet. A few important changes in terms of exports and imports. U.S. trade. U.S. rice imports raised 500,000 hundredweight. A couple offsets there. That's we raised long grain aromatic rice, Thai aromatic imports by 1 million tons, partially offset by lower imports from China or lower imports of medium short, and that's mainly imports into Puerto Rico from China. Domestic use up 1 million tons. That reflects those higher imports in part. As you know, I mean, we import rice to consume it, not to store it. So when imports are increasing, domestic use increases as well. Exports, on the other hand, down 4 million hundredweight, just reflecting a disappointing pace of long grain exports to the Western Hemisphere markets. And with higher imports and lower exports, ending stocks raised by 3.5 million hundredweight, and to the highest ending stocks in 10 years for the U.S. Season average market price down 20 cents per hundredweight this month. That some offsets there. Reductions in long grain season average price partially offset by higher prices for California medium short grain. Corn production. So focusing here again, as I noted earlier, on the Southern Hemisphere. Argentina, corn production reduced 1 million tons. I'll have a few slides to give you some details on that. Brazil also reduced 1 million tons, mainly reflecting the slow planting progress, reflecting the slow soybean harvest progress as well, which is driving that slow planting progress, and that is likely to reduce yield potential somewhat. So Argentina, corn and soybean, and as you know, this has been in the news lately. But we'll do a quick review of Argentina. So this is just the main production regions. As you can see, both corn and soybeans obviously grown in virtually the same areas across the country. Both crops at this point are kind of in their development stages, about a little more than a month or so before harvest begins. So kind of a critical time for weather. And when we look at the weather, just January was dry. There was a period in January where, and I have a rainfall trace I'll show next that shows that rains really stopped for about almost a month-long period in January, drying things out across most of the major growing areas. And it was also relatively hot. Some very hot days, but worth noting, this wasn't, you wouldn't be considered an extreme heat event, but it was hotter than normal. And that combined with the dry conditions reduced yield potential to some degree. So this is the rainfall trace I noted earlier. Started out the season quite favorable. Rains, tracking with expectations, tracking with the average, and then late December through late January really dried out pretty severely. And then more recently, we have got some beneficial rain. So now you see we're kind of back on pace with the average rainfall since late January to current. But given this dry period and the critical crop development period, that is why we cut production by 1 million tons. So that's corn. Soybeans, similar, experience the same weather conditions. Soybean production in Argentina, we cut by 3 million tons. Corn production by 1 million. And worth noting, corn production in Argentina, despite the cut, still up considerably from last year, year over year. If you'll recall, they had the leafhopper infestation last year that really dented their yields. Global corn balance sheet. I put the back year up there, 23-24, just to note that we increased our trade forecast, global trade estimate from last year. That just reflects higher exports out of Argentina. Looking at the pace that Argentina has been exporting, that tightens up ending stocks. That's also mostly Argentina. So we're carrying into the new year with a little bit tighter beginning stocks. Production we talked about, down almost 2 million tons, 1.9 million. Feed use trimmed a bit this month for the out year. That driven in part by Argentina, the smaller crop there. And trade, so export, corn exports. Reduced our forecast, export forecast for Brazil based on the smaller crop. Also reduced Ukraine's corn export forecast down 1 million tons, now at 22 million. And also worth noting, just like with wheat, China is, we also reduced our corn import forecast for China. We lowered it 3 million tons to 10 million. That would be the lowest since the 2019-2020 crop year. And that's down 7.5 million tons from a year ago. US corn balance sheet, as you can see, no changes there to any of the supply and use categories. Raised season average price 10 cents a bushel, just reflecting recent price strength. Global soybean production, also here focused on the Southern Hemisphere, where all the activity is. Argentina, we already talked about, reduced Argentina's soybean production 3 million tons. We'll talk a little bit about Brazil. Didn't make any change this month, but we also reduced Paraguay, and that reduction in Paraguay reflects some of the same weather conditions that were experienced in Argentina and that I will talk about in Brazil as well. So Brazil, map of the main areas where soybeans are produced in Brazil. As you know, the critical area, center west, Mato Grosso, Goiás, harvest underway, accounts for the bulk of production, and then we also have important production in the southern part of Brazil as well. And in that northern part, the center west part of the country, conditions have been quite favorable, despite getting off to a slow start, very slow start to the rainy season. Once the rains started, they came, and they came at a slightly above average pace. So very good conditions now for Mato Grosso and Mato Grosso and that part of the country, but less favorable the further south you go. So this is Mato Grosso do Sul. Dry in the southern part of this this state, a little bit better in the northern part of the state. But then when you go even further south, Rio Grande do Sul, extremely dry since mid-December or so. So rainfall well below average. So essentially what we have, so no change this month. Because as you can see, even from this map, just a map of the vegetative health across Brazil. Good conditions in the north essentially offset less favorable conditions in the south. And some of this dryness you can see in Paraná, Rio Grande do Sul clearly also extends into Paraguay as well, that same general area. So that's the summary. So no change in production. Tiny increase in area this year, just to be consistent with what CONABI is reporting. So we're looking at a record soybean area in Brazil and record production up about 10.5% from last year. Global soybean balance sheet. Talk a little bit about global crush. That is mainly driven by strong crush in Brazil, strong meal exports, indicating high meal production, high crush, partially offset by reduced crush in Paraguay, reflecting the smaller crop there. Ending stocks tightening up a little bit. So Argentina, smaller crop in Argentina and also tighter ending stocks in Brazil, reflecting their higher crush. Also just worth noting, we raised Iran's soybean meal imports as well. Strong demand from Iran. U.S. soybean balance sheet, again, here, no changes to any of the key variables. Lowered season average price, just again to reflect recent observed prices. And at this point, about 50% of the crop is marketed at roughly $9.90 per bushel. All right, moving into cotton. Raised China's cotton production forecast again this month. You'll recall we raised it last month as well. This just continues to reflect the strong Jennings reports coming out of China, and consistent with the excellent weather across the main growing region in Xinjiang. So China's cotton production, as you can see, up considerably from last year, 3.7 million bales. And then we also made a small adjustment to Brazil just based on government data. In terms of the global cotton balance sheet, really small changes here again this month. I put up the back year just to show that we revised China's consumption higher by 500,000 bales. That tightens up ending stocks and therefore tightens up beginning stocks for the new balance sheet. We talked about production driven mainly by an increase in China. And then no negligible change in our consumption forecast for the new balance sheet. And so mainly the changes in beginning stocks and production fall into 500,000 bale increase in ending stocks. Also just worth noting, in terms of global cotton markets, we're seeing very big cotton export volumes out of Brazil continuing. In January, they exported a record 1.9 million bales of cotton. U.S. balance sheet, small changes here. Just incorporating recent data from AMS on mill use, lowered that 100,000 bales, and that increases ending stocks by the same amount. And we lowered our season average price again this month by one and a half cents per pound, just reflecting recent cash and futures prices. So moving into sugar, beginning stocks up a bit there, 6,000 short tons. That just reflects a back year revision in cane production. Now for the current crop year balance sheet, production down 34,000 short tons this month. Some offsets there. So lower cane production, reduced 49,000 short tons, just reflecting reduced recovery. That's mainly in Florida. And beet production, sugar beet production, raised 15,000 short tons, reflecting strong recovery for sugar recovery from sugar beets so far this season. In terms of imports, we lowered our TRQ imports 96,000 short tons. Mainly that reflects an increase in the shortfall. FAS recently did a survey of all of the countries that hold quota allocation to see if they have sugar available to ship. Some didn't, so therefore we just increased the shortfall by that amount. High tier sugar imports continue to come in. That's mainly refined sugar. We're reporting it as we're seeing it enter. And so total supplies tighten up 101,000 short tons. And domestic deliveries, we lowered this month 75,000 short tons just based on SMD data. The Mexico sugar balance sheet. We lowered Mexico's production forecast by 235,000 metric tons. This reflects a few things, primarily lower areas and persistent drought as they continue to recover from persistent drought in Mexico. And also driven by insight from FAS Post down in Mexico as well. Imports continue to trickle in, so that increase was trued up with kind of the SUCA's estimate. So total supplies, Mexico tightening up 215,000 metric tons. Exports down, exports being kind of the balancing item here. That, of course, is all reduction in exports to third countries, no impact on exports to the U.S. Domestic use in Mexico also lowered 47,000 metric tons, reflecting lower deliveries to the IMEX program. Maybe some substitution with HFCS in some of those products, offsetting some of the sugar use there. And when you add it all up, just a small reduction in ending stocks to Mexico. So now let's move into meat and dairy. So starting with beef, and as you know, we got a couple important developments in the beef market within the past month. On the one hand, we got the cattle report just a few weeks ago, which showed a big calf crop, suggesting supporting an increase in supplies later in the year. And also imports from Mexico have been are now allowed. Now, of course, there's new protocols in place, and there's only two points of entry where they can enter. So there's going to be some constraints, but nevertheless, now we have that beef flowing into the country, contributing to U.S. supplies. Have those cattle flowing into the country, contributing to U.S. supplies. So beef production raised this month, mainly reflecting higher placements in the first half, and leading to and higher marketings in the second half of the year. Pork production, small change there, kind of some offsets, lower slaughter volume offset by higher weights. Turkey production reduced just to reflect some recent HPAI culling, and no change in our broiler production forecast. In terms of prices, beef steer prices remain high. Beef demand remains strong. We're seeing record cash prices and just raising our price forecast to keep up with those observed prices and what futures markets are indicating as well. Hog prices up just a bit, 25 cents per hundredweight this month, and that is all reflecting higher prices in the first quarter, just reflecting recent data. So $1 increase in the first quarter. Broiler and turkey price forecasts raised our broiler price forecast, expecting some price strength, especially in the second half of the year. Turkey price forecast lowered again this month based on recent prices. Just can't seem to get much traction there to show any continuous persistent strength in the turkey price. U.S. meat trade, our beef export forecast raised 200 million pounds, reflecting higher production in the U.S., as I just noted on the previous slide, and strong global demand. Pork exports reduced just a bit, still up year over year, but we're just now we're thinking a little bit slower growth in that export forecast for pork. Broiler exports also reduced to 130 million pounds. And basically, that's driven by high prices in the U.S., so not quite as competitive on global markets. And on the other hand, very strong export competition from Brazil. And small reduction in turkey exports as well, just reflecting tighter production in the US. In terms of dairy, US milk supply production lowered this month. Our production forecast lowered this month, reflecting data both from the milk production report from NAS and also the cattle report, which showed relatively tight supplies of dairy heifers. In terms of use and trade, import fat basis imports that reduced. That's all reduction in cheese and butter imports. Domestic use down. Fat basis also just reflecting tighter supplies in the U.S. Skim solids basis products exports reduced. Just U.S. Non-fat dry milk and whey is a little bit less competitive than it had been. In terms of dairy product prices, so a couple things worth noting here for 2024, $22.61 all milk price. That is the final estimate for 2024. Now the 2025 prices, a couple, a little bit of potentially confusing things going on here. Price changes reflect not only price changes, especially for the class prices and milk prices, reflect recent changes in the milk marketing order formulas as implemented. So it's a little bit harder to make the year-to-year comparison for those. But cheese prices for our cheese price forecast raised a little bit this month just based on tight inventories, and the other products reduced just based on, again, recent observed prices. Again, class 3 and class 4 reflecting both product prices and changes in those formula prices, and all milk price now forecast at $22.60, virtually unchanged from last year, year over year. All right, now for a quick, something kind of new and different, quick look at the U.S. egg supply and demand balance sheet. Important to point out here, and you know this, that so this is an annual balance sheet, and from this point forward, it assumes no additional cases of HPAI. So even with no additional cases of HPAI for the rest of the year, we would see year-over-year reductions in supplies and disappearance in the U.S. Now, for some additional perspective there, in January, we lost about 19.6 million birds. And in February, just to date in February, we've lost 3.7 million. So we're down about 23 million birds on a flock of just over 300 million. So again, this is the balance sheet as it would stand right now if we get no additional HPAI. So in some ways, a balance sheet like this isn't a great indicator of the current tightness in the market, but this chart might be a little bit better indicator. This is a price chart. Daily egg price, New York, recently passed $8 per dozen. Just again, reflecting those, it's a tight market. There's not a lot of buffer, not a lot of stocks to buffer the demand. And you can also worth noting here, prices go up very fast, and they also come down very fast. So that's the excitement in egg markets lately. And with that, I am going to wrap things up, and thank you all who attended in person, and everyone online as well. Hope you learned something, got a little bit more perspective on what went into the WASDE this month, and we will see you back here in March.